Okay, so a lot of you guys were asking me, well, what's the ideal diet or what's the ideal exercise regimen? And there's usually not enough time to talk about it, so I figured I'd post these 3 slides. A lot of y'all also tell me a lot of things that are myths. They're just not true. You read them in magazines and you read them on the internet, and I always just wish that there was a simple way to communicate the basics of what you're putting in your body, because ultimately it's your decision how you want to tailor your diet plan or your exercise regimen, not mine. And the reality is that you actually have a lot of leeway. You don't have to starve yourself. You don't have to be at the gym for 5 hours a week. You can do things in a smarter way. Okay, so the very basics. It's really no more complicated than this. We only put 3 macronutrients into our bodies. Bodies are made up of carbs, fats, and protein. If we broke each one of these down into its smaller units, you can see that for carbs, it's really just a bunch of sugar molecules that are linked together. When we need energy in the moment, for minutes, for hours, what we're using is a very limited supply of glucose that is in our bloodstream. When we combine them all together, they form a molecule called glycogen, and glycogen gets stored in the liver and in the muscle. And when we work out, along with fats, this glycogen is what we pull out in order to use as an energy source. And that's how we get rid of the carbs. Fats get broken down into fatty acids through a complicated mechanism that involves pancreatic enzymes and bile and transport proteins. You end up storing these as triacylglycerides. You'll notice that this is one of the lipids that's on your lipid panel, LDL, HDL, triglycerides, and cholesterol. Anyway, these get stored in adipose tissue. Protein gets broken down into amino acids. These are things like alanine, glycine, tryptophan. They essentially make up the entire structure of our bodies. It's literally the building blocks of every cell that's in our body. And so one thing that often gets neglected when considering meal planning for diets is that people just don't eat enough protein. And the reality is that when you're working out, you are constantly losing protein, and so this needs to be supplemented. But I'll talk about that later. The overall concept that I want you to understand is that in order to lose weight, fundamentally, you have to be in a state of calorie deficit. Now, don't let calorie deficit scare you into thinking that you can't eat. It just means that if we look at your activity throughout the length of the week, that the amount of calories that you put in your body is less than the amount of calories that you burned off. Calorie itself is a unit of energy. Calorie, if you burned a Dorito, I think a Dorito is 13 calories, and we set it on fire, and you watched it slowly disappear, what that means is that in that process required 13 calories of energy in order to do that. Essentially, this is what our bodies are doing when we work out, to the extent that we can mobilize these sources. And lastly on this slide, when we do anything, not just things that require sustained activity, when we do anything, your energy source is coming from either carbs or fats, which is why it's important to consume both when you're trying to lose weight. If you toss out one or the other, you're losing a vital and a key source of energy that your body's going to need. So you're just going to end up not only hungry all the time, you're going to end up tired. You're going to be exhausted. And carbs and fats are energy that we can use long term or down the road, 12 hours from now, 24 hours from now, 48 hours from now. If you have a big game, they always say eat complex carbs. Eat a big pasta dinner the night before, because when you're playing your game and it's intense, your body's constantly pulling from this starch and this carbohydrate store in order to do what it needs to do. You will burn both. When you work out, you will burn both carbs and fats. It depends on your level of exertion. Also, depending on the quality of the carbs that you eat, which is why we say, don't eat white bread. Eat complex carbs, because again, when you're exerting yourself, you will have more energy. It'll be more quality energy. and it won't have a deleterious effect.